Virginia trained me that I have to mute it as soon as I am officially live. So I need us to just be a little bit patient with the going live. As soon as I am officially live. Okay, we're good now. Beautiful. Okay, thank you all for your patience. Chag Sameach. I am so thrilled that you are here. And we take a moment to be together in the most natural and unnatural moment. We are in a Passover Seder, but we're in a Zoom Passover Seder, and it's not our usual. So I want to take a moment to point out the obvious, that this is a wonderful occasion because we get to be together, and yet it's also quite odd that we're not really physically together. And we'll talk more about that during the Seder itself. But I would like to first, for those who might not know, my wonderful associate, Rabbi Ricky Camel, and our fabulous song leader, Cindy Michelasi. And we are so happy that you're here. And now that you're here, I'm actually going to disappear and I'm going to share my screen with you so that you might be privy to seeing the wonderful, oh great, I get to find out about this update now, right? Okay. But let us take a moment to welcome everybody to our Seder. Why are we celebrating Passover? We're gathering tonight to celebrate the liberation of the Jewish people from slavery in Egypt more than 3,000 years ago. And our ceremony, the Seder, it means order. And we read from the Haggadah. Haggadah means the telling, and we tell the story of our deliverance from Egypt. And we're going to be using symbols whose meanings that we explore on the Seder table and on the Seder plate. So we will be going through that in just a little bit. But for now, I want to remind us that the telling of the story of freedom on Passover, or Pesach, we celebrate our Jewish history. And the story of the Exodus is not just a Jewish story, it's a story that embodies everyone's humanity. It's our passion for justice and freedom. And so tonight, we are celebrating the efforts of all people everywhere to free themselves and others from oppression. And our festive celebration is intended to be a source of inspiration and strength, to be drawn upon by each of us. You know, people are still coming in. Throughout the years, we strive to enhance our vigilance against injustice. And it's our prayer that we may be inspired to take the steps necessary to free ourselves from the forces that limit hope and freedom. And so we begin our Seder first, of course, with gratitude. With grateful thanks, we welcome everyone to our Passover Seder. I called our Passover Seder tonight, "Let all who are hungry come and eat," because I wanted everyone who was looking for spiritual renewal, spiritual nourishment, to be able to join together in our Pesach Seder, in our exploration of our humanity, going from bondage to freedom. And the question I have is, can you see me allowing people into the Seder late as well? Or is it just, am I just sharing, bless you, Jared, the main screen? If you want to chat it to me, you can. I'm always interested in hearing what you all can see. But it says, tonight we shall fulfill once again the Torah's instruction to remember the story of Exodus from Egypt all the days of our lives. Whether we have many Passover memories or are experiencing our first Seder tonight, we joyously tell the story of the Exodus as one community. And so, okay, that's good to know. And so we begin our Seder with Cindy's beautiful singing of Hine Ma Tov Uma Naim. How wonderful it is to be together at this wonderful time, sharing with one another, sitting together.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
And so our next slide tells us that the lighting of candles in our home symbolizes lighting the lamps of our people, spreading the light, joy, and knowledge of God's ways. And so we light and bless the festival candles tonight, marking the joy that Passover brings into our home, literally and figuratively. And so, as Cindy sings the blessing, I will light my Yom Tov candles and try to bring them over to where my camera is. Cindy, take it away.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kinishanu b'mitzvotav, letzivanu lehadlik ner shel Yom Tov.
Okay, and now we take up our wine glass or grape juice, and we know that we make kiddush. Wine is a symbol of joy in Judaism. And so we always want to have moderation in everything we do. But tonight we get to be a little bit less moderate, if you will, by drinking 4 cups of wine. Now, normally a Seder lasts many, many hours, and we're able to metabolize and oxidize all this wine. Tonight, our Seder will last just about an hour. And so I leave it to you how much wine you want to drink, because frankly, you're home and we don't have to worry. I mean, if our biggest problem tonight is social distancing, we don't have to worry about the wine. So Cindy gets to take up the Kiddush cup, which is the symbol of joy, and we sing the blessing together.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei peri hagafen.
And we sing together the wonderful opportunity for us to be together, to share this holy and special moment. Even though we are physically apart, our souls are joined together. And so we thank God for bringing us to this wonderful and sacred moment.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
Amen. And so we get back to the ritual washing of our hands. Now, the priests were obsessed with cleanliness, that we could never offer a sacrifice without washing our hands. And it has been offered that maybe this Seder, we should have orchatz, the actual washing of our hands without a blessing. Orchatz should follow every section of the Seder. So we have our Kadesh, orchatz, karpas, orchatz. Okay. Well, I'll leave that up to you, how often you want to wash your hands. But for me, living with little boys, I swear I walk around with a Clorox wipe. And Rabbi Camel, you're going to understand it's going to be a wet wipe to start. Yes. We don't want to do Clorox wipes, but just know that one day the wet wipe turns into a Clorox wipe especially during interesting times. And so it's interesting too that we wash these hands. These hands during this pandemic have become spreaders of disease. And we become painfully aware that our lack of cleanliness at times inadvertently could have spread some of the germs that are causing some of the pain. And so we ask God for the cognizance as we wash our hands to remember that these hands can be used for good or for not so good, and that we ask God to make our hands the healers and the bringers of light, that once again we'll be able to hold each other safely, God willing, one day. And so we wash our hands, and now we get to our explanation of the Seder plate. So Rabbi Camel's going to offer us an explanation, but I have to say, I was thinking about it, and I wondered if perhaps this year we could add some things to the Seder plate. Just a thought. Go ahead, Rabbi Camel.
So those are wonderful additions there to our Seder plate. So I bought a Seder plate with me for tonight to take a look at the 6, and then we're going to talk about a 7th item and the reasons behind that. So beginning up at the top, we have the maror, the bitter herbs, the horseradish, usually is what is used, and it represents the pain of the Jewish people being enslaved in Egypt. Then going on to the left here to the right, we have zaroach, the bone, the shank bone, which represents the sacrifices made by the Jewish people. Now, if you ask people to say, what are the 6 items on the Seder plate? The one that's usually, the one that's most forgotten is this next one, chazeret. Chazeret is another, this is charoset. Charoset represents the mortar. This is delicious, the apple and nut mixture, of course, that we have that is very tasty and very delicious, which represents the mortar of the bricks that were used by the Israelites in making the buildings or the pyramids, whatever it might be, that the Egyptians had them make. Then we get to the chazeret. The chazeret is also another bitter herb. So if you're wondering why, what the 6th one could be, if you say another bitter herb, you may very well be right. Usually this is a piece of lettuce, but it is the 2nd bitter herb that represents the pain of the enslaved Jewish peoples, just as we had with the maror. Above that, we have the karpas, the wonderful, usually represented as parsley, but any green leafy vegetable that's not bitter. As you can see behind Rabbi Kaznowski, she has wonderful parsley, wonderful karpas behind her to show the beautiful and wonderful green that is happening now as we enter into spring. We then have the beitzah, the egg, another representation of spring. As we know, this is a time of rebirth, and as everything around us is starting to grow again. Something that you don't see on this Seder plate, but something that we do add as a 7th item is an orange, also a tapuz in Hebrew. The reason that we have an orange on the Seder plate goes back some years now, a few decades, to when women were first becoming rabbis in the 1970s. Rabbi Dr. Susanna Heschel was going around, I think in Florida, and was at a congregation, and somebody stood up and said, women belong on the bima just as much as orange on a Seder plate. And ever since then, an orange has been included on our Seder plates, one, of course, to show that we need to be egalitarian in our leadership, but as well as now just a big, a way of showing that we must be inclusive in our holiday of Passover. As the holiday of Passover, one of the main values is to be inclusive. So the next thing we do, our next blessing, is that of the karpas. The karpas, as we said, was a blessing of spring, but we don't just eat the karpas after we say the blessing. The usual tradition is to dip the karpas, if you have it, into salt water to recognize the tears that also went along with the story of the Exodus from Egypt, with the Passover story. So we say the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri ha'adamah. Blessed are you, eternal, our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of the fruit of the earth. Wonderful. Now, so now we have our matzah, our bread of affliction. So we have on the plate on our table 3 pieces of matzah. Matzah is unleavened bread, bread that has not had time to rise or to leaven. It is the food we ate during our exodus from Egypt. As the Torah teaches, they baked unleavened cakes of the dough that they had taken out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, since they had been driven out of Egypt and could not delay, which we have from Exodus chapter 12, verse 39. And the 3 pieces of matzah are a reminder to us of God's covenant with the patriarchs and matriarchs of the Jewish people, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. So we now break the middle matzah in half. The larger piece is called the afikomen. In Greek, the word afikomen means dessert, I believe, and it is our tradition to hide the afikomen. After the meal, the young people at the Seder table hunt for it and return it, possibly for a reward, so that the Seder may be completed, because the Seder can't be completed unless the afikomen is found. But the search for the afikomen reminds us that it is the memory of freedoms that have been lost that inspires each generation to continue the pursuit of liberty, tolerance, and justice. And just as we seek out the afikomen, we seek out those wonderful things. So we can say, although everyone's on mute, we can still say together, this is the bread of affliction that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. All who are hungry, let them come and eat. All who are in need, let them come celebrate. Passover with us. May it be God's will to redeem us from all trouble and all servitude. Next year at this season, may the whole house of Israel and all of peoples be free. So you can now.
Thank you, Rabbi Camel. I'm going to remind you to please mute your microphones if you have not done so already. I can go ahead and mute you, but I don't want to have to, because I'd have to stop sharing the screen and then I'd put it on the screen, you guys, and then you'd all see who wasn't muted. And it's more important, lo boshe, we should never shame each other. We might call you the one who does not know how to mute. You might be the simplest child or the one who does not know how to mute on Zoom. That you might be typecast this year, but please, everybody, put yourselves on mute. Okay, thank you, Rabbi. And now we go to our 4 questions right on time, because we want to ask the 4 questions and we want our littlest people to ask the 4 questions. But this year, because we can, I wanted to offer you a what's the word? I wanted to offer you an opportunity to see someone who can actually do it even better than my children, because all of the singing is done by voice and mouth and little else. I thought you would love this rendition of Ma Nishtana, the 4 questions.
Mikol Haleilo, Mikol Haleilo, Shebechol Haleilo, Anu Ofrin Kalei Tumata.
It sounds like the music stopped. So when we have technical difficulties, we just punt and go on. And I always ask for your graciousness and your kindness. The Titiner Trio is putting up a note as if I can read it. So hold on, go ahead and put it up now that I have my glasses on. Let's see. Can you read it? Oh, there it is. Our youngest is saying the 4 questions. Are you the best? You are the best. You really are. You have figured out how to beat technology. Well done. That was even better than the Maccabeats. So if you want the link to the Maccabeats, let me know and I'll text it to you, or you can look it up by Googling it. But nice to know that very cool stuff exists out there in the ether land. Okay, hold on 1 second while I discipline a young child. It's hard. It is. It's okay though. It's good. Rabbi Camel, soon, God willing, you will understand.
Yes.
Yes. It's all okay. All right. So we go back to our slideshow. You know, it's interesting. It's hard to believe that just 2 weeks ago, I'd never heard of Zoom and did not know anything about it. So to be where we are today, fascinating, is it not? So we celebrate tonight because we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt and God delivered us from bondage to freedom. And had our ancestors not been redeemed from Egyptian slavery, we and our children's children would have remained slaves. So even if all of us were wise and educated by our study of Torah, it would still be our responsibility each year to tell the story of our deliverance from Egypt, to dwell at length on the remembrance of our exodus of Passover, to be considered praiseworthy. And so we reply to the 4 questions by saying, Avadim hayinu lefaro b'mitzrayim. We were slaves in Egypt, and the Eternal One, our God, freed us from Egypt. For all of you Rabbi Bob throwbacks, ready? With a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. That's how God redeemed us. And so we answer our questions. Matzah symbolizes both slavery and freedom. It's the bread of affliction because the night that we had to leave Egypt, we were in a rush. And so we quickly didn't let the bread rise and we rushed off after eating matzah with maror, the bitter herbs, and our paschal lamb, our lamb sacrifice. A couple of years ago, when I lived in Nashville, Tennessee, I was friends with a Baptist minister. Of course I was, right? Because, you know, who else was I going to be friends with? And he came to me one day and said, I really want to learn how to make matzah. Would you help me make matzah so my synagogue, well, his church could make matzah? And I'm like, gosh, how do you make matzah? I didn't know how to make matzah. So I called my mother. I said, Mom, how do you make matzah? She's like, I don't know. We always went to the store and bought a box. You know, she said, I'll tell you what, you take some flour, you take some water, a little salt, you put it in a bowl, you mix it up, and then you roll it out with a rolling pin and you stick a fork in it to make those holes. And then you put it on your back and walk through the desert for 40 years. That was my mother's answer to how you make matzah. So back to the Passover story. We eat matzah during Passover to remind us that we were slaves and to remind us of God's help when we were freed. And so we also eat especially the bitter herbs because of the bitterness of slavery. And we should never forget how it felt to be oppressed. Tonight, we dip herbs twice when we don't normally dip herbs at all. But understand that the Seder, the Passover dinner, was actually based on a Greek banquet, complete with all the different steps. And the dipping is what one did in the hors d'oeuvres, if you will. And so the dipping the herbs with the parsley is a way not only to cleanse the palate, but to show that we are remembering the tears of the Israelites. And of course, why do we recline when we eat? Because the posturing of reclining shows that we're free. Also, it's good to lie on your left side. If you ever suffer from any kind of abdominal discomfort, laying on your left side, they say helps to alleviate, and I'm not really sure why, but some of my doctor congregants, I'm sure, can weigh in, maybe even in the chat, and talk about, well, it's taking some somebody's feedbacking, and that's okay. So thank you. Okay, we'll talk about it in the chat. And so we go on and we talk about the 4 different kinds of children. We have the wise child, we have the wicked child, we have the simple child, and we have the child that doesn't even know how to ask. And unfortunately, we as children studying the Passover story might have taken on a typecasting role that one was wise and one was wicked, but truly all of these different states of being reside in all of us, that at times and on certain subjects we're wise, and at times and on certain subjects we're wicked. At times we are simple, and sometimes we don't even know the right questions to ask. But free people get to ask questions. And so we are encouraged, remembering that it is our responsibility to ask questions and seek answers. And so we get to the story of Moses and the liberation of Egypt from Egypt, and Rabbi Camel is going to take us away.
All right, so when we get to the story of the liberation, as Rabbi Kosnowski just phrased it so nicely, from Egypt, it's called in the Haggadah the Magid. Now the Magid in Hebrew is kind of the noun version of the verb ledaber, to tell, or the Hagid, to say, or to say, and it's to tell. So a English translation would be the telling. However, that's not the greatest English. So usually I think a better translation would be the story of the Exodus from Egypt. So in this story, as I mentioned, I think in my Passover video, we know now a little bit more how we hope, pray, and act for something to pass over. And I'm going to go in a little bit talking about something else that I've noticed in this Passover story that I never thought that I would know, but making me feel very connected to some of the characters in this text. But I can read a little bit first, if that's, sorry. So Pharaoh commanded the death of all sons born to the ancestors enslaved in Egypt. But Shifra and Puah, the midwives present at the births, refused to obey Pharaoh and did not distinguish between sons and daughters. When one Israelite woman gave birth to a son, she hid him from the Egyptians. After he grew too old to hide, she put him in a basket and placed it among the reeds in the Nile. His older sister hid nearby to see what would happen to her brother. When Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe in the river, she found the baby in the basket. The baby's sister offered to find her an Israelite woman to nurse the baby. The woman she brought was the baby's own mother. When he grew older, his mother returned the baby to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him. She named him Moses, meaning I drew him out of the water and raised him in Pharaoh's court. This, as you might know, is the first story that we get in the book of Exodus. It's a very important one. There are many heroic characters. We heard of Shifra and Puah, the 2 Egyptian midwives who sacrificed a lot to make sure that they could protect babies that were being born to the Israelite woman. And of course, we hear about Moses' mother and sister, Miriam. We know the name of Moses' sister, Yocheved, the name of Moses' mother. If you watch the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston, they changed that to Yoshabel. I don't think that's that great of a change. Yocheved, I would say, is a little bit better, but it is a part of the Passover story that I never thought that I would really identify with. However, actually, over these last couple of weeks, I've very much been thinking about Yocheved, thinking about the anxieties, the fears that she had of giving birth to a son, giving birth to a child in a time of really kind of unprecedented unknowing. Not just unknowing, but actually coming into a world that was more dangerous than the world that has come before it. Knowing, of course, that in just a couple of days, my wife Rebecca will be having a child. I will be sitting next to her while she has the child, holding her hand. I am thinking about Yocheved more and more, and the amount of courage that she had in having this baby Moses during this time. And it's something that I think that we can all try and understand, all try and think about during this time, that even though that we are faced against different challenges that we had even just a month ago, it is the community, it is the siblings, which we don't have just yet, but the whole community who is able to come together, put the baby in a little basket, send down the river, and make sure that he was safe. So during this time, I think we can all try and be as heroic as Yocheved and Miriam, and make sure that everyone that is around us can be raised up, especially the most vulnerable among us. And that is something that I've been thinking about during this Passover season, and I'm sure we'll continue to think about as hopefully everything goes well with the birth of Rebecca and I's child in just 4 or 5 days.
Thank you, Rabbi. And so we continue with the telling of our story as we get now to the 10 plagues. And so we look at the 10 plagues. We join together to recite each of the 10 plagues while removing a drop of wine from our cups. With the removal of this wine, we lessen or diminish our joy, symbolically acknowledging the suffering of the Egyptians and envisioning ourselves casting out every plague that threatens our humanity. Now, I want to just say that when we read the words of our Haggadah, they ring a little bit too close to home this year, that Rabbi Kamel can relate to Yocheved bringing a child into a time of great uncertainty. The 10 plagues, we are also living through a time of great uncertainty, but I want to make the differentiation between a plague and a pandemic, because a plague is actually defined as a punishment from God, and a pandemic, just from the name pan, coming from the Greek meaning all, means it's equal opportunity. It's not personal and it is not a punishment. But Jared wants to weigh in. Yes, my darling.
A plague comes from God.
Yes, a plague comes from God.
And a pandemic comes from China.
Okay, very funny, Jared. Thank you for sharing. The pandemic, though, is not personal. It doesn't care how much our bank accounts have in it. It doesn't care what color we are, what gender, what race. It unfortunately seems to affect other groups more predominantly than others. But I think that has to do with social conditions. But we are painfully and acutely aware of the sorrow as we diminish our joy about the Egyptians dying, and we are acutely aware of what's happening in our society as well. And so we take our pinkies and we dip our pinky. First, we've washed our hands, I hope. We dip our pinky into our cup of wine or juice, diminishing our joy with every drop. And okay, Joseph. And then at the end, we remember not to lick our finger, because again, we want to diminish our joy. But if you lick your finger, it's okay. We won't talk about you because we can't really see you. So Cindy is going to be singing our 10 plagues as we each take our pinkies and diminish our joy in the wine.
Dam, Sfardea, Kinim, Arov, Dever, Shechin, Barad, Arbe, Choshech, Makat Bechorot.
Okay. Now let's be real. Don't raise your hand, but how many of you have forgotten licked your pinky? Just kidding. All right. So after the horrible last plague, the slaying of the firstborn of all the Egyptians, the angel of death passed over our doorposts of the Israelites because we had taken from the sacrificial lamb, we'd taken the blood and put it on our doorposts. Thankfully, we don't have blood of lambs on our doorposts today because that would just be icky and not so socially acceptable. But instead, we have a mezuzah or amulet that contains the Shema and V'ahavta inside, the declaration of our faith, and to remind us and be mindful that when we enter a Jewish home, that we want to be loving and kind to the inhabitants inside. So there is a mezuzah on the front of the doorpost, and you can have it on every other door with the exception of, anybody want to put it in the chat, which room do we not have a mezuzah on? I'm looking for the chat. Anybody want to weigh in? It's the, yep, very good, Adam. Oh, and Joe, wow, Taylor, look at all you guys. You guys are, we do not put a mezuzah on the bathroom because it's, yes, we want to separate the holy from the profane. And so, but a mezuzah can go on every door. And just a little FYI, the halacha is when you move out of your house, if the inhabitant who's moving in is Jewish, you are actually halachically required to keep your mezuzah only on the outer door. You can take all the internal mezuzot with you, but you have to leave the mezuzah on the front door. Just a little FYI. Okay, and so we continue with Mi Chamocha. The Israelites got to freedom running through the Red Sea, and they were so happy to be free that in their joy, they sang Mi Chamocha.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osefele, nora tehilot osefele. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one that we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. And Miriam the prophet took her timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed her just as she had planned. And Miriam raised her voice in song, she sang with praise and might. We've just lived through a miracle, we're gonna dance tonight. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one that we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long.
And so to honor Miriam, we've placed a cup on our Seder table, the Kos Miriam, the cup of Miriam, filled with water, because it was Miriam who enabled the Israelites to have access to water during their journey in the desert. And so in the olden days, we would take a sip of water and people would pass this cup of water around and take a sip from it. Something that today we go, no, we don't do that. So just know that we have the Kos Miriam, like the Kos Eliyahu, the Elijah cup, and it can just stay on the table untouched. Now, I unfortunately, when we were doing the 10 plagues, forgot about my favorite plague. And so I need Cindy to go back. And we invite all the young children and all those who care to join us in my favorite Passover song, the frog song.
One morning when Pharaoh awoke in his bed, there were frogs in his bed and frogs on his head, frogs on his nose and frogs on his toes. Frogs here, frogs there, frogs were jumping everywhere.
I asked my children if they would like to jump like frogs. They were getting to that point where not so much this year, but it was worth asking. I know, I'm sorry. And now, of course, we get to the place in our Passover Seder, where we thank God for all that God did for you. So we sing the song Dayenu. It would have been sufficient, or it would have been enough. It's a song of gratitude. And in Hebrew, when Israelis want to tell each other, like, stop it, you're killing me already, they say to each other, die. And for an American sensibilities, to hear someone say to another person, die, it's kind of, ooh, it's a little offensive to the sensibilities. But when you understand that die means enough already, so Dayenu is, it would have been enough for us. And so we sing Dayenu together. We're only doing 3 verses, but if we were together, I would actually have sprung for a whole bunch of scallions, because in the Sephardic tradition, it is customary to take a scallion and during the chorus Dayenu, you hit the person in the head that's sitting next to you with the scallion, not the onion side, just the green side.
Show like die.
Yeah. So we go ahead and sing together Dayenu.
Ilu hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu natan lanu et hashabat, natan lanu et hashabat, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu natan lanu et Torah, natan lanu et Torah, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu.
And now we get to the part of our Seder where we are obligated to talk about 3 Passover symbols that if we don't talk about or expound upon the meaning of Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, we haven't truly celebrated the Passover festival. And so remember, what is the meaning of Pesach? So we have a shank bone, unless we don't, like I don't. I actually have some ginger that I was going to hold up, but I wanted to say one of the reasons why I don't have a shank bone is they're very hard to find. And it's interesting to note that we at this time where we can't get out safely are not obligated for the first time halachically in many, many, many years to not have this symbol in our home. In fact, I'm not kidding when I say this, but the CRC, the Chicago Board of Rabbis, sent this out. Can you all see this? Nope, you can't. Let's see if I can show it to you.
Listen to this.
Okay, one second. I want to show this to you if I may, because I'm not making this up. That's what's so crazy, can you see this? I hope. I'm going to make it big. Okay. This is from the Chicago Rabbinic Council, that because so many people have tested positive for COVID, that it is necessary for people to stay home, that you do not have to kosher your house. You do not have to go get a shank bone. You do not have to have these kosher items this particular year. And so I share that with you because I show you that Judaism is adaptable. And so I think it's an important thing for us to understand that we don't just act without thinking. We have to remember that saving a life overrides all the other commandments. And so this year we're painfully aware of this concept of saving a life. Oh, you didn't see the screen share? So you can't see the screen share. Can I show it to you? Do you want to? I can show it to you. Let's see if I can. Nope. Hold on. Let's see. Because I have to show you that I'm not making this up. 1 second. Maccabeats. We're going to get rid of them. And we get to, you ready? Is this, can you see this? Nope. Okay. Uh-oh, 2 messages. You can't see it. Guess what? We're moving on. And so let me see if I can. Yeah, there you go. Here's the urgent update, because I didn't want you to think that I was making this up. I wanted to show you this actually came from, yes, very good. Okay. From the Chicago Board of Orthodox Rabbis. Okay. So back to our Seder. Okay. And now I'm going to show you our slideshow. Okay. So we have our shank bone because we remind us that of the sacrifice that was made. And then of course we have our matzah. And so it's the unleavened bread, and it symbolizes the bread of affliction, and it also symbolizes our freedom. And finally, we have the bitter herbs that remind us the lives of our ancestors were made bitter from the oppression of Egyptian slavery. And so we take our second cup of wine and we say the blessing together.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen. And now we say the blessing over our hand washing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim, that now we wash our hands. And so we had 3 pieces of matzah on a plate, and now we're going to break the matzah and distribute it. And before performing the commandment of eating it, we said the blessing of washing our hands. Okay, al netilat yadayim. And now we take the matzah and we make the blessing over all bread.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
And then we also make the blessing over just matzah. And so we understand that even if we don't like matzah, we are halachically obligated, or just it is the custom to eat an olive-sized piece of matzah. And so first we bless and then we eat. Cindy?
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu al achilat matzah.
Amen. And finally, we take the maror, the bitter herbs, and we recite the blessing together, putting the bitter herbs on our matzah and then taking a bite, thereby clearing our sinuses. And if we have any allergies in the spring, they are gone after this blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu al achilat maror.
And then we have to eat unleavened bread with bitter herbs, and you combine matzah and maror, and you also take a little bit of charoset, which represents the bricks that our ancestors used to make the pyramids. And so we never want to forget the bitterness of slavery. And in times of oppression and in times of pandemic, we always want to keep alive hope of freedom, hope of a cure, and hope of better times. And so at this point, we would eat the meal, but because I promised to get you out in about an hour, while you eat the meal, we are going to look for the afikomen. Now you might say, Rabbi, how are we going to look for the afikomen? But the truth is, I am going to give you the opportunity to go to our website, www.kangetzchaim.org, and you get to search for the matzah on the website. And so I'm giving you this opportunity to find the matzah. And as soon as somebody chats me that they found it, we can go on with our Seder. So if you want, you can actually chat with me and tell me where I should go on the website, or you can go look for yourself and go to the chat, and I'll continue with the Seder while you do that. We now come to the blessing after the meal. And so it is customary for us to bless after the meal, because it's easy to bless before we're hungry and we are grateful for what we have, but to bless after really shows a deeper level of gratitude because we've gotten what we wanted, but to still take the time to make the blessing is very holy. When we don't have enough time to do the entire Birkat Hamazon, it is absolutely acceptable to just say Baruch Atah Adonai Hazan et Hakol. And that is as if you have said the entire blessing. Don't tell anybody that at Azrui, because they'll never do the Birkat Hamazon again. And that's actually half the fun of going to Azrui, is to be able to say the Birkat Hamazon and sing it and have a great time. And now it is time for us to make a blessing over the third cup of wine. So please refill your glasses and go ahead, Cindy, with the next blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen. Anybody find the matzah yet? Did we, not yet? Nobody on the website? Did we hide it a little bit too well? I don't know. I might have to give you some clues. But anyway, while you're still looking for the afikomen, it is time for us to open the door for Eliyahu Hanavi, to open the door for Elijah. And so we open our door to invite Elijah in to come and drink a little bit of the wine. It's sort of our Santa Claus story. You know, if you think about it, we have some guy moving across Europe, getting cookies and milk, going down a chimney. We Jews have Elijah going in a fiery chariot, drinking the wine. You tell me which one you think is coming out better, just saying. But the real reason, everybody is having trouble accessing the site. It may be because we're crashing the site. Okay, I'll tell you what. While Cindy's singing Eliyahu, Adam, that's very profound. He said, maybe the afikomen is inside of us all. I'll tell you what, when Cindy's singing Eliyahu Hanavi, I will access the website and I will take you to the afikomen. Would that be acceptable for you, Chatsketeers? Okay, good. Thank you. I have two yeses, and in Robert's Rules of Order, that's a go. Okay, the real reason that we opened the door for Elijah is during the Middle Ages, when there was blood libel and lots of distrust between Christians and Jews. When we would have Passover Seders, we would open our doors to show our Christian neighbors that nothing weird was happening here. And so we had to have some kind of narrative to explain why we were just randomly opening our doors in the middle of a Seder. And we came up with this idea of opening the door for Elijah so as not to scare our children, but really to show our Christian neighbors and friends that nothing wonky was happening. And so we remember Elijah by singing Eliyahu Hanavi. And while Cindy sings Eliyahu Hanavi, we'll go to the Congregation Etz Chaim website and find the afikomen.
Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hakiladi. Bimera ve'amenu, Yavo Elenu, Imashiach ben David, Imashiach ben David, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Atishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hakilati.
right. Well, that didn't work, but okay, we tried, right? Again, we can only be as good as our technology. And I ask for your kindness and grace. Please don't text me mean-spirited texts because we're doing the best we can. And I will find out why our site is so slow. All good things because we're finding stuff out. Okay, so I am now going to screen share our very last bit of, let's see, where are we going? Over here. All righty. Oh, okay, very good. Let's see if I can make this work. No, we don't want to see how my, that didn't work. Let's try my screen share. Oh, now I remember. Yes, thank you. Okay, let's go on and we give thanks. We give our Psalms of praise, our Hallel, and we give thanks as a community for the opportunity to come together and be with each other. Oh, Ann Stein's on the website. Go to condolences and congratulations. And so as a community, we give thanks for all the blessings that we have received to be together with our families, to be delivered from bondage, and to just have this experience to be close to one another. And finally, Cindy gets to bless us with the fourth cup of wine.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen. And we have given thanks to God by saying a blessing over 4 cups of wine as we celebrated the sanctity of life and the survival of the Jewish people, the holiness of our bond to every family member, and the meaning of shalom, of peace. And so finally, we want to sing Lishana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim. May we be blessed to have Seder next year in Jerusalem. And tonight, Howard and Kathy got to have Seder with their daughter in Jerusalem at noon. So that was very cool. And I have a nice photo of Jerusalem at sunset. And so Cindy, let's sing Lishana Haba B'Yerushalayim.
Lishana Haba'a, Lishana Haba'a, Lishana Haba B'Yerushalayim. Lishana Haba'a, Lishana Haba'a, Lishana Haba B'Yerushalayim. Lishana Haba'a, Lishana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim. Lishana Haba'a, Lishana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim. Lishana Haba'a, Lishana Haba'a, Lishana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim. Lishana Haba'a, Lishana Haba'a, Lishana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim.
And finally, for all of you diehard fans of the Passover singing, I promised to get you out at 8 o'clock, which we're at 8:01, not too shabby. But I thought we would sing my favorite song, Who Knows One. We would just sing up to 6 because it really goes up to 13. But Rabbi Bob always told me that it doesn't get funnier, it just gets longer. So we could sing up to 6 verses of my favorite song and then stay in the room and let's take another couple of minutes to chat, to say hello, to catch up with each other. We don't have to be in such a hurry, especially look, you just drank 4 glasses of wine in an hour. Don't be in such a rush to get anywhere else. Sit, stay, it's all good. But please join me in the singing of my favorite song, Who Knows One? And I want you all to unmute yourselves so you can answer, I know one. So who knows one?
I know.
I know one.
I know one.
On earth.
God
I
is
know one.
one. Hey, cheery bim bum, ay 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 ay, cheery bim bum, who knows two?
I know.
Two.
For the tablets of the covenant. God is one. Cheery bim bum, ay 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 ay, cheery bim bum, who knows?
I know.
three.
The patriarchs.
I know three.
Isaac, Jacob, tablets, God, and God is one. Hey, cheery bim bum, ay 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 ay, cheery bim bum, knows four
I know.
are the matriarchs. For the fathers, two are the tablets. God,
Father God in heaven on earth.
God is one. Hey, cheery bim bum, ay 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 ay, cheery bim bum, who knows five?
I know.
The books
The books of the Torah. Four are the mothers, three are the fathers. Tablets
One is God.
is God. Is one. Hey, cheery bim bum, ay 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 ay, cheery bim bum, one.
I know
May
six.
you all be blessed with a Zisen Pesach, with a Pesach full of love and joy, and may you all be safe as we go forward into our new world and our new reality, whatever that may be.
Okay, let's go.
Brave and know that God, who took us out of Egypt, has our back. Sameach.
Pesach Sameach.
Good job, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tell your kids to wave.
Hi, Mercy.
Sameach.
Aye, 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 aye,
Guy.
Bills.
Bye.
Aye, aye, Captain.
Hi, Siegel family.
Who's that?
How you guys doing?
Hi, Dini.
Hi there, Jenny.
Hi, Bender family. It's the Siegel family. Hey, you guys got a dog. That's pretty crazy.
Okay,
No, I
Rick
know.
Martinez wins.
Brad. Oh, there's a dog. Ken Siegel's got a dog too.
Hey.
We've got three.
Before you were born.
Oh, that's my doctor.
Cindy Swanson.
Hi, Ryan.
Howard and Peggy.
Hello.
Howard?
Hello.
Yeah. Are you there?
Bye, everyone.
Sure. Hi.
Evans family.
How you doing?
Hi, Mrs. Stein.
Thank you, Cindy.
Hello. Hey, Mr.
How are ya?